Goodness, what a crowd. Good morning.
Good morning.
Is it Greenville College? Any of you are from? Are you part of a class in comparative religions? Is that what brings you here, or something else?
World religions.
Sorry?
World religions.
World religions. Well, I hope your morning at Mava is interesting and beneficial. So you have some idea of the fundamentals of Buddhism already? Of the class?
Yeah,
A
hopefully.
little bit. Excellent. Well, I'm going to continue from a talk that I gave a few weeks ago on the Heart Sutra, and specifically a new translation of the Heart Sutra, which I've passed out to you, which was recently completed by a scholar and translator and artist, calligrapher named Kaz Tanahashi, and a Zen teacher named Roshi Joan Halifax, who's based in Mexico, the Upaya Zen Center. But I will recap the main points of my last talk before going on to discuss other aspects of the sutra which I didn't cover previously. Here at Mava, we chant a different set of sutras in alternating months. So in September, when I gave my first talk, we were chanting the Heart Sutra. This month, if I'm not mistaken, we've changed to another set, and we'll be chanting an excerpt from the Diamond Sutra. So we won't be chanting the Heart Sutra this morning, but it is chanted at Buddhist monasteries and practice centers around the world on, I'm sure, a daily basis, perhaps continuously throughout the day. It's one of the most well-known and well-loved sutras in Mahayana Buddhism, despite its enigmatic nature. Why do I say it's enigmatic? Well, in the old tradition, or the traditional translation, it begins by saying Avalokiteshvara, or Guanyin, the Bodhisattva of compassion. And this Bodhisattva is pictured in a statue, a sculpture down in a pavilion on the other side of the lake. If you've been there already this morning, or perhaps you'll have a chance to visit that before you leave. It says that Avalokiteshvara, while meditating in Prajna Paramita, which is newly translated as wisdom beyond wisdom, realizes the empty nature of all five streams of body, heart, and mind. And we refer to these streams as skandhas. These are features, bodily and mental features that characterize sentient beings, human beings. So Avalokiteshvara realizes that these five skandhas are empty. Furthermore, the sutra says, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. So this idea of emptiness is enigmatic when we first encounter it. We also read in the sutra a series of negations. In emptiness, there is no form. There is no feeling, conception, volition, and consciousness. Those are the five skandhas. No eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. No form, sound, smell, taste, touch, and dharmas. No realm of vision, and so forth, up to no realm of mind consciousness. No ignorance, and no ending of ignorance, up to no aging and death, and no ending of aging and death. No suffering, no cause, no extinction, no path, referring to the Four Noble Truths. No wisdom and no attainment, there is nothing to be attained. Another example of what I mean by enigmatic. Last time I also said that the new translation was intended to be more accessible for non-Buddhists or those with little knowledge of special terms in Buddhism, or terms rendered in Sanskrit, such as bodhisattva. The new translation changes Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara to Avalokiteshvara who helps all to awaken. I also touched on the essential teachings of the Heart Sutra, which in the traditional translation is titled The Heart of Prajnaparamita Sutra, and in the new translation becomes the Sutra on the Heart of Realizing Wisdom Beyond Wisdom. The purpose of the sutra is to explain the core practice in Mahayana Buddhism. That is, realization or actualization of wisdom through meditation. The sutra also teaches that Prajnaparamita, or wisdom beyond wisdom, means the understanding that reality is both and neither, singularistic and or pluralistic. And these concepts are often referred to as dualistic versus non-dualistic. And what we mean by that is that we're in the habit of viewing things, persons, as having intrinsic existence on an individual basis. Whereas we're taught, the sutra teaches, Mahayana Buddhism teaches, that all phenomena, all beings, are actually one and completely interdependent. But the sutra goes one step further and says that pluralism and singularism, or dualism, non-dualism, are actually themselves interdependent and therefore empty. I then gave a brief history of the sutra, the most widely circulated version of which, certainly in East Asia, is that of Xuanzang, a Chinese monk who lived in the 7th century. According to a biography written about on Xuanzang soon after his death, he received the sutra from a poor sick monk whom he met while traveling through Sichuan on his way to India to research Mahayana sutras. I also referred to the theory that was put forth by an American scholar, a professor named Jan Nattier, that the Heart Sutra was not translated from Sanskrit into Chinese, but was rather translated from Chinese into Sanskrit, making it of Chinese, not Indian origin. I mentioned that this sutra merges 3 major Mahayana elements. First is the figure of Avalokiteshvara, who is more highly and popularly revered in China than in India. A key teaching, secondly, from the Prajnaparamita Sutra, namely that of shunyata, or emptiness. And third, the concluding mantra, which I will discuss in more detail this morning. It's at the very end of the sutra. It's never translated into any other language. It's simply recited in the original Sanskrit. It begins gate, gate, paragate. I concluded my last talk, by focusing on the idea of shunyata, traditionally translated into English as emptiness, and changed in this new translation to boundlessness. I described Kaz Tanahashi and Roshi Jones' rationale for making this potentially controversial change as arising from the troublesome connotations that emptiness has, the English word emptiness. It often, I think you'll agree, connotes notions of voidness, lack, insufficiency, even non-existence. Roshi Joan has an extensive experience in hospice settings, and this made her acutely aware of these negative associations with the word emptiness when reciting the Heart Sutra for dying persons. So finding a more positive sounding term, such as boundlessness, gave rise, she felt, to more positive feelings in the hospice setting. And she calls this, interestingly, non-pessimism, which, she says, allows for feelings of hopefulness in the face of death, as opposed to optimism, which implies certainty, more certainty than we can really have, or on the other hand, pessimism, which implies hopelessness. So, non-pessimism. Today I'd like to continue by talking about the idea of freedom from in the New Translation, which replaces the list of negations, which I read to you earlier from the traditional translation. And also I'll talk about the significance of the final mantra, which is always, as I said, recited in Sanskrit. Gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhi svaha. There is a very famous scholar of Zen Buddhism named D.T. Suzuki, and he said this about the Heart Sutra. What specifically strikes us most while pursuing the text is that it is almost nothing else but a series of negations, and that what is known as emptiness is pure negativism, which ultimately reduces all things into nothingness. But in this Heart Sutra course, which I participated in, Kaz Tanahashi had something wonderful to say about negativism, or negation. He said there are at least 4 kinds of negation. First is a straight negation. This is not good. Next, there is affirmative negation. There is no question about it. So this takes the form of negation using no, but makes an affirmative statement. Third is what he calls transcendental negation. Not one, not two. Beyond one or two. Finally, negation as an expression of freedom. You don't need to do it. The freedom not to do things. So we can think of the negation in the Heart Sutra as an expression of freedom. A few minutes ago I quoted the older translation's sequence of negations, and here's how the new translation handles them. O Shariputra, boundlessness is the nature of all things. And a little further on, boundlessness is not limited by form, nor by feelings, perceptions, inclinations, or discernment. It is free of the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind, free of sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and any object of mind, free of sensory realms, including the realm of the mind. It is free of ignorance and the end of ignorance. Boundlessness is free of old age and death, and free of the end of old age and death. It is free of suffering, arising, cessation, and path, and free of wisdom and attainment. So, looking closely, you can see that the negations of the old translation are changed to positive expressions of freedom in the new translation. In the class, in the course, Roshi Joan addressed this idea of freedom in a beautiful way. She said that in the early teachings of the Buddha, he spoke about the ocean having one taste, and that's the taste of salt. And that his teachings have one taste, and that's the taste of freedom. But think about what freedom has come to mean in Western society, where it's involved in the ideas of democracy, individuality, doing your own thing. But is that what the Buddha meant by freedom? The Heart Sutra, we find, actually brings in an ethical sense of freedom. in a subtle way if we look closely, as Roshi Jo points out. This boundlessness, which is said to be free of eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, mind, and all the rest, is really about being free from fear and not being engaged in the kind of activities that define and defend the self. Everything we do is connected with ideas of self. By recognizing the self as empty or boundless, we learn not to cling to it. We learn to let it go, to be free of it, to stop defending it, to live fearlessly because we have nothing to lose in terms of self. She compares this and the way in which we can practice compassion towards others who are equally free and boundless. She compares it to appreciating the transient, impermanent beauty of a flower, say an orchid, or the spring cherry blossoms in Japan, where, as she described it, people sit under the falling blossoms drinking sake. They become drunk on the beauty of the blossoms, with or without sake, rejoicing in their beauty while recognizing the impermanence, their fleeting nature. There is a kind of brokenheartedness that comes with truly appreciating this boundlessness, this fragility of all life. What follows from realizing the impermanence of life is the decision not to squander my life, but to go deep. We deeply see the fragility and boundlessness of ourselves and others and all phenomena, and deeply respect all of life arising from that insight. Furthermore, the Heart Sutra teaches that we cannot become attached even to the idea of emptiness or boundlessness. It says, boundlessness is free of ignorance and the end of ignorance. Boundlessness is free of old age and death, and free of the end of old age and death. It is free of suffering, arising, cessation, and path, and free of wisdom and attainment. Kaz Tanahashi says that this notion of freedom from the end of ignorance and from the end of old age and death reminds us of the three stages of our experience in meditation. First, we recognize the existence of ignorance, old age, and death. Then we become free from ignorance, old age, and death, and then becoming free from ignorance, free from freedom from ignorance, old age, and death. So in the opening stage of meditation, I recognize the difference between enlightened beings, awakened ones, and myself, who am not. And so I'm inspired to practice. In the second stage, we experience freedom from these discriminatory views. We free ourselves from trying to become awakened because we realize we already are. And yet we still practice, for it's in practice that we manifest this realization. And in the third stage, we push through the distinction between pluralism and singularism, or dualism and non-dualism. And we go back to pluralism, but in a new way, different from before. We have a new freedom which transcends the opposition of the two views, realizing that within pluralism there is singularism, and within singularism there is pluralism. Kaz Tanahashi uses the image of dancing with one foot in singularism and the other foot in pluralism, as the way to practice non-attachment to emptiness. Now I'd like to turn to the mantra at the end of the Heart Sutra. Gate, gate, paragate, Parasamgate Bodhisvaha. So first of all, what is a mantra? Tanahashi defines it as a specially combined sacred formula of sounds often used as a magical spell. Because the sounds of a mantra are not easily comprehensible, they do not appeal to the intellect, but instead reverberate within our whole body, heart, and mind. Instead of making us think, the sounds help us just to be in a way that includes reverence. There's another Sanskrit word for this, which is dharani, and it's related to the verb meaning carry, maintain, spell, or practice. It is sometimes translated into Chinese as zongzhi, meaning holding all. In fact, the earliest known title of the Heart Sutra is, in fact, the Sutra of the Dharani of Prajnaparamita. Gate gate is usually interpreted as gone, gone, but it can also be interpreted as coming or arriving. Kaz Tanahashi, based on his scholarship, offers the alternative interpretation as arriving, arriving, arriving together, arriving all the way. Bodhi means awakening or enlightenment. Svaha is a very old Vedic term meaning blessing, joy, or even ecstasy. Roshi Jones suggested comparing it to hallelujah in Judeo-Christian terms. We can view this mantra as a wonderful reminder for our meditation practice that each moment of our practice is not separate from awakening or enlightenment. Each moment of our practice and our life is blessed. Tanahashi tells us that the word mantra comes from the verb man, which means think, imagine, honor, or set one's mind on. Man is in the same family as the noun manas, which means mind, intellect, or perception. In the ancient Vedic tradition which preceded Hinduism, mantra meant sacred utterance, encompassing speech, text, prayer, or song of praise. In Hinduism, mystical verses are believed to be a form of divinity in sound. And over time, the practice of reciting magical sonic formulas like this for gaining power over objects or problems became a central and frequent practice. An early sutra says that the Buddha prohibited the incantation of such verses, but later permitted their use as a remedy for pain or disease. Chanting mantra goes beyond ordinary language and keeps us from dualistic thinking. In this way, it's regarded as a method of concentration and remembrance, and is often used for gaining power in meditation. The first line of the final section of the Heart Sutra, just before the mantra begins, reads, this is from the New Translation, "Know that realizing wisdom beyond wisdom is no other than this wondrous mantra, luminous, unequaled, and supreme. It relieves all suffering. It is genuine, not illusory." So this line of the Heart Sutra suggests that Prajnaparamita, or wisdom beyond wisdom, is no other than Dharani, or holder of all. It means that Prajnaparamita, as the totality of Buddhist practice, is concentrated in its short mantra, and that in fact the totality of Buddhist practice is this mantra, in a sense. D.T. Suzuki, whom I quoted earlier, explains in this way with a little story about, a little fantasy, I suppose, about Avalokiteshvara. He says, utterly exhausted intellectually and emotionally, Avalokiteshvara made a final leap. The last tie which held him to the world of relativity and self-power completely snapped. He found himself on the other shore. Overwhelmed with his feelings, he could only keep uttering the gate. The gate then became his mantram. The gate became the mantram of the prajna paramita. With this ejaculation, everything was cleared up, and Avalokiteshvara's discipline in the prajna was brought to a finish. So we can recite the Heart Sutra in two ways, either the entire sutra or the mantra by itself. This latter method is less intellectual and perhaps more intense as a practice of wholehearted recitation. The chanting of the mantra has been one of the oldest continuous single practices in Buddhism. And Kaz Tanahashi suggests that the accumulated chanting completed in the past provides practitioners, like ourselves, with a tool that inspires, guards, and heals with utmost intensity. I want to conclude my talk by also introducing you to another short chant, which Kaz Tanahashi has translated, and which is an important chant in Rinzai Zen centers ever since the time Hakuin, the founder of that school, recommended that it be chanted daily. It's called the 10-line life-affirming Sutra of Avalokiteshvara. I've passed that out this morning as well. I've made it a part of my own daily practice, and it has become quite important to me. And I think it's important to understand that wisdom beyond wisdom is not separate from compassion and loving kindness. Avalokiteshvara is known as the bodhisattva of compassion or loving kindness. And we all need an ideal image of loving kindness that's central to wisdom beyond wisdom. When faced with the choice of being indifferent, insensitive, violent, or to be kind and loving, having Avalokiteshvara as our model and holding her in mind can be a powerful practice. You might notice that Dr. Suzuki referred to Avalokiteshvara as he, and I have referred to the same person as she. And the bodhisattva is often pictured in kind of androgynous terms. Can be thought of as masculine or feminine, and ultimately transcends both. So here is the sutra, which you have, or some of you have. Avalokiteshvara, perceiver of the cries of the world, takes refuge in Buddha, will be a Buddha, helps all to be Buddhas, is not separate from Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, being eternal, intimate, pure, and joyful. In the morning, be one with Avalokiteshvara. In the evening, be one with Avalokiteshvara, whose heart, moment by moment, arises, whose heart, moment by moment, remains. Thank you for your attention. May we all be joyful in our practice of awakening, and may we, like Avalokiteshvara, help all beings to awaken.